Navigating the Four podcast, where we discuss all things faith, healing, leadership, and communication. Exploring the topic of communication, I'm Matt Barker, and I'm joined by the other hosts of the podcast, tackling the topic of faith. We have Freed Hardeman Professor of Bible, Matt Cook.
Hey, guys.
Exploring the perspective of leadership, we have Assistant Dean of Emerging and Innovative Programs at Freed Hardeman, Mr. Jared Gott.
Hello.
And giving us the perspective of all things mental health, we have Director of the University Counseling Center at Freed Hardeman, Mr. Nathan Judd.
Hey.
All right, thanks for joining us for this episode of Navigating the Four, where we bring you real talk, fresh perspectives, and a few laughs along the way. Whether you're in the middle of figuring life out or just here for some good conversation, you're in the right place. So grab a seat, maybe a cup of coffee, and let's start navigating the four together. All right, welcome to Season 3, Episode 2. And today we're talking about a leadership topic, the way of the shepherd, and this will be part one of a two-part series, and we're going to hand it off to Jared Gott.
Okay, so today I want to discuss this book. It's a very little book. I have it sitting here with me. I think it's right at, 100 pages. And the book is called The Way of the Shepherd. So this book was introduced to me a few years ago. And the book focuses on, it's written from the perspective of this guy who is just graduated college. He's about to enter the world of business. And so he goes and he schedules an interview or a sit down with this individual who's had a lot of success in the field that he's in. This individual takes him sort of under the wing and tries to prep him to be a leader, but does that not at his company, but takes him to his farm because he is a shepherd to teach him some leadership principles through the sheep. There are 7 principles that are laid out in this book that I was just telling the rest of the guys. They do not just apply to leadership in the world of business or within whatever industry you're in. They apply to church work. They apply to leading your families. I mean, they're really, if you interact with a group of people and you have influence over a group of people, these principles apply, right? They are general sort of leadership principles. So I want to introduce each one and just sort of talk about what the author gets at a little bit, but then throw some questions out for us to discuss within each of our sort of purview. So the first principle in The Way of the Shepherd is to know the condition of your flock. And the idea here is that you are not just preoccupied with the work that people are doing or the task that is set before them, but you also know them as people. In the book, the author is taken, and the first thing he has to do with his flock before, putting it out to pasture or anything is just to go through and inspect the sheep and see what's going on with them, what issues need to be addressed. Do they have, pests that need to be handled? Are they, are any of them injured? Like what's going on? And so maybe a question for us to just start with is, why is knowing the condition of your flock, as you define it, why is that so important? What is the difference in being known versus being supervised, and why does that matter?
I'm kind of thinking about when you said flock, the immediate picture I had was the whole group and like the condition of the whole group. So you said something about a pest, which is probably affecting the whole group, but yeah. I'm thinking too, knowing the condition of the flock also is like individual in addition to the group, and knowing each one of the people that I'm engaging with, and knowing this person's struggling today, but this person's on a high. Or my family, we need to crack down on the budget this month because we had some extra expenses, and so that's the condition of the flock. But I think it's relevant to say, is this a community thing that's a condition, or is this something that's more individual basis? That's what's coming to mind for me.
I think understanding other people's backgrounds and experiences, what leads them to make certain decisions that they do, why they work the way that they do, how they handle interactions with other people, especially like in a workplace. So understanding the condition of your flock is what got them to where they are today. Maybe what other jobs have they had and what was their experience there? What are they looking for in this particular job? Kind of having that understanding of background and experiences helps you understand a little bit more about why they do things the way they do, why they communicate with others the way they do. And this maybe even touches a little bit on the mental health side of, is there any trauma that they've been through in their life that has caused them to act a certain way, not be trusting of people, not willing to work in a group? So all those different things, I think it takes, from a leadership standpoint, knowing the condition of your flock, understanding backgrounds and experiences is definitely part of that, I think.
For me, I like to be lighthearted and throw in some sarcasm. And that sort of lighthearted and sarcastic nature can be really hurtful if it pushes a button of somebody's going through something, especially if it's recent or there's a family situation or whatever. And so, and with my kids, the way I speak at church, all of it, when I know what's going on, that's when I know, okay, I don't need to joke about that. I don't need to throw in sarcasm here because they're going through stuff. And I think about, from a church context, we've had a lot of storms over the past 3 years that have impacted people in significant ways. And so speaking lightheartedly about tornadoes is just not something you need to do in McNairy County, Tennessee, unless you're somebody, I think, who's been impacted by it. And then, they've got the leverage, can joke about it because they've experienced it firsthand. But yeah, that's for me. It helps me to know when to use humor and sarcasm and when not to.
There's a saying, if it's hysterical, it's historical. And so, if someone has a much bigger reaction than the situation seems to call for, we've probably stepped into something that's in their story, something historical. So,
yeah, a lot of the idea behind knowing the flock is validating the ones who are following you, right? And showing that there's an investment on your part into them as people, right? Not just as cogs in the wheel of whatever machine you're responsible for. There is a challenge in this principle in that it does take time, right? That's one of the things the author points out. It takes time for him to go through each sheep and see what's going on. It takes time to inspect and get to know what's happening. And I have talked to teams that I've worked with before, because this is, I would say, this is a principle that is a challenge for me, right? It is something that I've owned up with them. I'm not great at remembering some of the personal things, it's so-and-so's birthday. I'm not great at remembering, those individual moments. I have to make a conscious effort to try to do those types of things, right? Or to have, just sit down, sort of casual, well, what did everybody do this weekend, right? So some of those touch-based things, because I have a list of things I need to get done, right? And the more that I'm not working on that list, the more the list doesn't shrink, right? That's the pressure. So there is this challenge with this principle. There is also a challenge in balancing, how do you build this level of relational leadership, right? How do you invest in each of these people while also balancing that with accountability? How do you walk that line of caring personally, right? But also holding them accountable to tasks or metrics that you've set before them. So there are a lot of tensions in this principle. One of the questions that gets asked is, what if you led from awareness instead of assumption, right? Of actually being aware of the individual and not just assuming that things are good, not just assuming that, because they're not doing well. We talked about this. We're doing the anxiety opportunity in professional development on campus. So we talked the other day about sort of relabeling actions or behaviors that we see that a student may be doing. They're disengaged. We don't have to just assume that they hate the class or hate us or hate the subject material. There could be so many things going on in their lives. They're barely hanging on and coping, right? Same with an employee, same with a family member, someone at church, right? Just because they're not engaged in that moment doesn't mean, if I'm aware of them and their situations and what's going on, I don't have to lead them from assumption that they're bad at their job or they don't care that they're checking out. So the second principle of this book is to discover the shape of the sheep. What are the challenges that you've seen in trying to lead everybody the same way?
For me, I see this most clearly in my kids and their differing personalities, and specifically in leading them to faith. One of my children will, if I were to hint that this is something that I think they should do or want them to do, they would do it immediately, no questions asked, without it being their decision. The other one, if I hinted at it or kind of pushed towards it, they would probably run the opposite direction, right? And so knowing how to shepherd a person who's a people pleaser and would do it just because that I think they should do it, versus if they think I want them to do it, they're probably not going to do it. That's for my kids. Learning how to shepherd that has been an interesting experience.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about, and actually was another podcast that I was on talked about the topic of temperament, and I didn't know exactly a lot of what all that entailed as far as how that differs from personality, but everybody is made a certain way. We talk about the verse in Psalm that says we're fearfully and wonderfully made by God, which means we are made different by God for a reason, and we're made up, and there's certain things about us that we really can't change. It's just the way we are. We might be more anxious than other people, and that's just the way we are. We have to sometimes figure out how to deal with that, right, in the situations we find ourselves in. But the way that we say things to one person, and the example with kids was a great one, Matt, because you could parent your kids the same way, but they're going to respond to you in different ways. And the example we talked about on the podcast was you can say, clean your room. To one, that means I need to clean my room. To the other, it means you're controlling me and you need to stop controlling me, and they'll lash out and just do the opposite, right? And that has to do with their temperament. Now, they shouldn't do that. The behavior of that is not great, but their temperament is telling them this is what I'm hearing you say, right? So from a leadership standpoint, we have all different temperaments, all different personalities, all different ways that people come to how you're communicating with them. And thinking about the shape of the sheep, part of that shape is what is their temperament, what is kind of what makes them click, what makes them who they are. And part of that is just how we're made by God, right? And so some of those things we can't inherently change. We can adapt to our environment. And, obviously if we might take things a certain way from a supervisor, we can't always lash out at that supervisor, but we might kind of, as like Matt said, a people pleaser, we're going to want to do that job right away. But someone that maybe takes things more, you're trying to control me, then they're going to take it completely different than that people pleaser. So just kind of understanding that everybody's different and trying our best to speak in a way that reaches them and not just a way that we think we would respond, right? Looking at it from another perspective is helpful, I think, in that.
I've had a lot of interns working with me in addition to some of the actual employees that I have. And I'm just thinking about as a supervisor, I try to be really flexible with the people that are under me. And what that does for me with those people is I think later on can pay itself back, that they know like I'm willing to stretch for you. And so when I need to call that in, like it's because I need some help with something. So I've got some people where that's kind of how I supervise. And then I've had some interns, no employees like this, but some interns where I'm generally pretty nice. I try to say things in a nice way, try to have a long rope, but I can think of some where like I just had to very bluntly say, this is what I need you to do. This is what I've said. You're not doing what I said. This is what I need you to do. And that was really uncomfortable. That was stepping out of my comfort zone for sure. But it's just like, this person is not moving forward, and I have expectations that I need. That some people I can say, hey, would you mind doing that? But this other person, I'm like, do this. I've already told you to do this. You're not doing it. So,
yeah. And we've spent time in previous seasons of this show, right? Like looking at personality testing and some different things and discovering like, there are differences even among the four of us, right? If someone were to come in and actually try to manage this podcast, right? And sit down and say, listen, I need the four of you to do this, right? I need you to be here at this time. I need you to, be prepared this way. Like, it's not going to work, right? Matt just provided us with a nice few pages of notes before our previous episode. I've got nothing, right? It's just, we all have different approaches to that. And so this point in the book actually does, I don't think you can apply it the same across all purviews that you may have, right? Like they get into from a business standpoint, right? From a leadership in a workplace, right? That hiring matters, right? If you find someone who doesn't fit the team, then you are often inheriting someone else's problems, right? You are contaminating the team as a whole, and there's a time and a place to remove or cull someone from the team that's just not going to work out. And when I say like culling someone out in a workplace, it's not because of anything they've necessarily done, right? It's just from an attitude, from an approach to the way they go about work. So they have this SHAPE acronym that I think is pretty good to think through. So S is operating out of strengths and making sure really that people are in a position that allows them to exercise their strengths. I have been working with a course and a research project on campus for the last 5 years. And when we did the four of us, when we did some of the Clifton Strengths stuff, we had different strengths, but we have strengths that I think we would attribute to a certain generation, right? Especially when you think about students coming into higher education. We would have assumed that, they have strengths like discipline and focus and responsibility and the things needed to like go in, tackle a course, handle all the assignments, keep up with their lives, et cetera. Over the last 5 years, the students, college-age students who come in year after year after year, the strengths they demonstrate are almost entirely the same. Like 8 out of the 10 are the same year after year after year. And it's not those same strengths. They're bringing in strengths like belief and empathy and harmony, relator. They're bringing in these strengths that
more relational in nature.
They are. They're more relational. They're a little soft-skilled. They're more character type strengths, right, than accomplishing work, command type strengths. Yeah. That doesn't mean their strengths are any less, right? But if I'm going to be managing a flock, if I'm going to be leading a team, then I have to understand what their strengths are and how they can best operate out of those strengths. Because people do the best when they're not trying to compensate for something that is not a strength, but when they're operating out of their strengths. And those strengths, the whole point I was trying to get to was that strength dynamic is likely to change over time. So even once you have figured out your team and you know everybody's strengths, as you continue to hire or add people or replace people, that strength is naturally going to evolve. You're going to get people in that have different strengths, and then you have to sort of accommodate for that. The H in the acronym is heart. Do they care about what they're doing? Are they passionate about it? It sort of goes along with the idea of operating out of strengths, but just do you care? We talked in a previous episode about some intergenerational communication things, and the point was made that a younger generation today is more likely, if they don't feel maybe validated or heard, or that they are engaging with their works, to seek opportunities elsewhere. And I think that's true to an extent, right? At some point, everyone has to make what they need to live, right? They can't just keep chasing opportunities. But if you have someone who is passionate about the work, then you receive the added bonus of them not just accomplishing the task set before them, but investing in it and actually caring about the work. And even sometimes when you don't have individuals who care about the work, do they care about the team? Do they care about the rest of the flock, right? Because then they'll be willing to go an extra mile for that. The A in this acronym is attitude. Are people positive? Are people teachable? The point was made in the book, if you compromise with negative individuals for the sake of talent or achievement or ability, all you're doing is teaching others to copy their bad habits.
And even a combative attitude, somebody who just really likes to argue, that impacts the room significantly. When I've been in a couple situations where maybe those sorts of personalities have moved out of the room, and it just completely changes the dynamic when just one person with an attitude leaves the room, and I mean like kind of in general leaves the team. Boy, it changes everything, and it's so much better when that happens.
The kind of culture that you're trying to create for the moment, right? Like Matt Cook mentioned, somebody who is combative, right? We do, with the youth group, we do those coffee house conversations, right? Where the idea is we're going to have a Bible study, but instead of it being a lecture, we want you to wrestle with the verses, which means to some degree, I will throw out questions encouraging them to be, to a degree, combative, right? Like argue about it, work through it together, debate, like pull other verses, make your argument, right? But within a healthy framework, right? The same kind of combative, maybe debate sort of centered style there, I wouldn't allow in a Bible class, like on a Sunday morning, because we're trying to just present material and work through it. So it depends what you're trying to create in the moment and where those things have a place. And maybe for some, that's a good outlet, right? For them to have some of that argumentative nature and sort of just get some of that. So we have the strengths of the sheep. We have the heart. Do they care about what they're doing? Are they passionate about it? The attitude with which they approach it. The P is personality, and specifically like personality alignment. The author of the book references like a work culture where things turn over and change constantly. And so the people that are being brought into that organization, are they okay with that? Or do they need more stability? And the point he makes is that if they need more stability, the culture at the workplace isn't going to change, right? But it's not the right fit for them. For example, the office I work with on campus is a lot of innovative ideas. That means that we're going to work on ideas that are never going to come to fruition. They are going to get explored, and we're going to put a lot of work into them for a decision to be made of we're not going to actually pursue that any longer. So if someone has an issue with, I'm doing a lot of work and it's not going to result in a payoff, my team isn't the right one for them. Like, we're going to invest a lot for it to go nowhere, and that's got to be okay.
I would have a hard time with that. That'd be hard.
Yeah. I mean, and it's not any good, right, wrong, right? It's just personality alignment.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with working on something that goes on a shelf. Mm-hmm. That's fine. But he talks about, are you aligning people's personality in a way? And again, that looks different in like a family, right? Where personalities are strong and you're in the same space together, and it's not just a, you're not working out here.
See you later.
The culture here isn't changing. So,
and if you do that, I'll give you my business card. Just
that would be great. Yeah. And then the E in this is experiences, and a reminder that people are a product of their life experiences. And so when we're thinking about the shape of the flock, that there are things beyond what we can control that influence the overall shape of the flock. And so maybe a discussion question, and it may not be a very long one, how do we keep our biases from sort of wrecking the production of the whole, right? If I say, well, I want people who only align with my strengths, my personality, my attitude, that may not be the best thing for the team. For example, I need individuals who want to engage with people on a daily basis, right? They just want to have ongoing conversations. I don't. At times I want to recluse into my office, shut the door, turn the light off, get some work done. So if I were only hiring people like that, it would be sort of a dismal environment. How do I make sure that I'm not applying my own biases or people I think would work with, and instead realizing I need others?
Yeah, I wrote something down earlier, and I was thinking we'd probably get to it eventually. And so I was thinking about looking at things from different perspectives, and I think that does involve, if you're a person that's in a position where you're hiring people, you have to think about things, not just what I would want, but what does the whole team need? And I had wrote down, find people in your circle and empower others. So I was thinking specifically, you mentioned the example in the beginning about, well, I don't always think about when it's somebody's birthday and like we need to have like a little celebration or at least acknowledge that it's their birthday. I'm not great about that either. Probably, if we were honest, probably a lot of guys aren't good at that. But our wives are. They're really good about thinking about things like that. So it could be hiring someone that's more relational, that is good about thinking about that. Maybe it's someone that's in a position where maybe they're in human resources or something that is really good at thinking about a lot of those relational things and empowering them to take ownership of something. If it's something you're not good at, empower someone else to say, hey, this is something I struggle with. You're really good at thinking about other people's, their needs. Not that it should be a cop-out for the boss. They should try their best to acknowledge that as well. But having someone that kind of keeps them in check a little bit, I think is important to make sure that everybody, even those that, there might be people exactly like the boss that really don't care about the birthdays either. But then there's also the other half of the business that's like, I really care about people saying happy birthday to me, right? And that might be something that keeps them happy and in a happy workplace by having people just acknowledge some of those relational things. So I had wrote down, find people to put in your circle that, and empowering them to take ownership of certain things. I think that's important with considering the shape of your flock.
I'm thinking about, where did we as a culture lose track that differences are good? I mean,
right.
We are such in a culture where I may say, here's how I view it, and somebody else gets so offended that I view it differently than they do. And that goes every which way. But I think all of the differences need to hear and learn from the other sides of everything. I think if I'm fully on one side of something and everything I say comes from that perspective, I'm probably not looking at everything the right way. I think we need to realize that differing opinions are going to offer counterpoints that I need to hear and things that I can grow from and make me better. So I welcome the differences. I just think we need to do it respectfully.
Yeah, and I think this applies to a church setting when we acknowledge that the church is designed to be diverse. It is a body with different parts. And so as a leader, if I can learn to see all of those differences, this is actually, the shape originated with Rick Warren and Purpose-Driven Church or Life, whichever one. And it was spiritual gifts, heart, abilities, personality, and experience. And I think sometimes in churches, leaders fail to explore and really understand people's shapes. Instead, they pigeonhole talents. And this is what it looks like in our context. For men, it's, well, if you're a Christian man, then you got to get up in front of people and lead in some way like that. If you're a woman, you need to be teaching a Bible class, or, this is going to sound terrible, but cooking a casserole for this event that we're having. And we don't sometimes leave room for the fact that there are men who don't want to be on stage talking, and they're not gifted in that way, and that's okay. Like, and then there are women who like would rather stab their eyes out than teach a kids class, and that's okay. When leaders can find the shape of the sheep in their flock, that's when they can equip them to do real, meaningful work, or in the church's case, ministry that doesn't just occur inside the walls of a church building, but it equips people and empowers people to serve through their entire lives.
All right. So the third and last point for this episode is the idea of helping your sheep identify with you. And so in the book, the author talks about visiting this flock and having to take the little like ear gun thing and like tag the sheep, right? And make sure that all the flock is accounted for. And so he kind of protests to the shepherd and is like, yeah, but this is really going to hurt these sheep, right? When I do it, like that's going to be painful. And the shepherd explains to him like, yeah, it will be, but there is a benefit in them being tagged with my brand and knowing which are mine. If they're lost, right, they'll be returned. If I can't account for them all, I'll go find them, right? There is a benefit to them bearing this mark, even though it's going to cause some momentary pain. And so the lesson that he talks about there is this idea of, as a leader, sort of how do we put our brand or our mark on a team? And ultimately, that puts a lot of pressure and responsibility on the shepherd or the leader, right? Because the mark that they will wear are the values that you instill within yourself.
I'm really curious where this is going. I still can't. I don't imagine how does a leader mark somebody. So I really am genuinely interested, like I'm where this is going.
Struggling with it a little bit too. Now I can think of things where it's like, this is my team and we're on the same page, but it's more like we've talked.
Pierce my ears, the song that's coming to mind.
I mean, that's kind of it, right? I mean, it's not any type of obviously like physical mark brand anything, right? It's not any of that. But let's say
tattoos in the UCC.
Let's say that within my team, somebody comes in, right? And my expectation is, as a team, we are committed to providing excellent customer service, right? And so, okay, well, Nathan, you've gone 2 days without responding to this email from a student or a parent, right? And I come to you and say, hey, you can't let that happen again.
Gotcha, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
My expectation for this team is that we get back reasonably, within the next day, kind of a thing. And so I'm telling you, you've got to change how you are.
Yeah.
Right? Because I'm saying for this team, the mark that this team is going to carry is what I value. Right? Which means first I have to define what I value in the team, and then have to mold each of the team members to say, like, this is what we're going to be collectively.
Yeah.
Which means there may be some pain, quote unquote, in you changing to fit that mold, or saying, like, I'm not going to fit that mold. And that's also part of sort of cultivating a flock. Now, in a church sense, right, it, like Matt made the reference, pierce my ear, like, yeah, there is a standard we are all upholding to, and that does mean changing things about ourselves to fit.
Yeah, but I think even church leaders can help a church develop an identity by continuing to communicate the things that matter the most to us. One of the kind of buzzwords that I hear at our church is intentional, and even among the leaders. And so we're not going to do something just because it's the way that we've always done it, or the way we used to do it, or other churches do it. We're going to choose to do it because this is what's best for our church. And so I think if you can keep saying, hey, we're going to be intentional, then when something comes up that it's like, that's not intentional, we're just doing that, because it gives people the ability to say, wait a second, Why are we doing this? Does this meet our goals?
And so part of the point in this chapter isn't just that like leaders get to decide how everyone is, they put that mark on them and they have to follow. It gets into the idea of, do you have positional authority or do you have earned trust?
Yeah.
Right? Because sometimes people come in and they believe they have authority just because of the title or the position they're in. So they say, well, now my mark on everything, and everyone rejects it, right?
Oh,
because,
man,
why? Why change for the sake of change type thing?
Yeah.
And there's no reason or trust or transparency in that versus somebody who explains, is transparent, communicates why we're doing this, the value behind it, and then tries to, get everyone to adapt and get on board.
Yeah. In addition to that, I think I'm tracking with you. I've said, like, I'm not a big stickler for time. Like, that's not my concern. I realize there's a university thing that is bigger than me, but, like, I don't care. But when we have a student who is scheduled for an appointment, like, be there on time. Like, that is so important. The principle being that we want the students to know we care about them and are going to be there for them. So being the bigger principle that you're talking about, and here's where my heart is in this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what I was kind of hearing from what all y'all were saying is it takes a little bit of both, right? We have to have a mission or some values with wherever we're at, whether it's at church, whether it's in a business or organization. There's some non-negotiables. Like there's certain things we have to do, right? If it's business, if it's customer service, we have to do that, right? And these are things that are expected of you, regardless of your personality, regardless of what you prefer to do. You have to do these things. This is something that is expected of you. And I think ultimately people respect that in a leader. These are some things that we need to do as a business to have success, right? But you also have to think about things from a relational standpoint as well, right? These are some things we have to do. These might be some ways you can go about doing that, knowing full well we have to get these things done. How you go about doing that might look a little different, but as long as you're adhering to these standards, these core values, this mission that we have as an organization, I think that could be done different ways as long as that goal is getting accomplished. So I think maybe it's a little bit of both in that.
Yep. Okay, so if you are new to leadership or you're in a leadership role, 3 sort of just principles that, think on after this episode. The idea of discovering the shape of your sheep, the idea of knowing the condition of your flock, so knowing a little bit about, what's going on in their lives, thinking of them more than just the task they're there to accomplish, knowing the shape, knowing, why they're there, what their heart is all about in that work. Are they aligned with their personality, their strengths, their expectations? And then help your sheep identify with you, know the values that you're wanting to instill, know the goals that you are setting and trying to lead them to, and then help everyone get on board. We'll pick up with the other 4 in a future episode.
Awesome. Good episode. All right. Thanks for joining us today on Navigating the 4. We hope today's conversation sparks something real in your faith, your healing, your leadership, or your communication. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to follow us, subscribe, and share it with a friend, and leave us a review. Until next time, keep showing up, keep growing, and keep navigating the 4. We'll see you next time on Navigating the 4 podcast.